Hello and welcome to a great interview chat here with Ciaran Carey, obviously Limerick legend, Patrickswell legend also. We're going to talk about your business, My Move Counselling, a little bit later on. But Ciaran, first of all, we can't not talk about what your Limerick team did to my Tipperary team on Sunday. We were 10 points ahead of you. We had you bet. A few minutes later, you were level. Then you were up by 7, eventually winning by 5. An unbelievable comeback, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I'd say they were probably slightly late eating the hang sandwiches and tea at half time. Yeah, but it was a special game, Shane, and I suppose it was lovely to be at it, witness it. And I was sizing it up, at the very start of the warm-up, and I was there with a friend of mine, and I just turned around to him at one stage and I said, 1-0 already to Tipperary in the tactics. And he said to me, how do you mean by that? And I said, every chance they get, I said, they're underneath the stand in the shade. And, so that told me they were rightly tuned in, and they were fine coming every area of their prep, even for their on of and the whole of Limerick team were kind of a lateral line together, and Tipperary were all under the shadow. So that taught me that that everything kind of sussed, and and signs on the first quarter, the first 15 minutes, it was proper Munster final hurling. It was tit for tat, punch for punch, score for score. Both teams missing a few wides, and I think might have been 1-6. And the second quarter, then Tip went into a different gear, and the second half, then I suppose realistically, if there's anything like a polished second half performance, but I suppose I was really pleased. Really, it was a proper team performance in the second half, man for man. Everybody did their job, including Pat Ryan and Deborah Reedy, who came on, and the chap who came on, I can't think of his name.
Robbie Hanley.
Hanley. They all took the game to Tipperary to put them the back foot. And they ran at them from the second half onwards, and any time they did that to put them into pressure. And in fairness to Keane Lynch's first half performance, that's all he was doing really. Anytime his possession, he was running at him, they fouled him, or else he created a score or made a score. So that's the way I kind of viewed it, in kind of a short term, if you like.
If I'm going to put the Tipperary hat on, the supporter hat on, as I was watching the game, first half absolutely glorious. I'm kind of singing from the rooftops. Second half, it's like watching a car crash at speed, actually, not even in slow motion, at speed. What was it like for you? Like, what emotions did you go through as you were watching this Limerick team? And first of all, the first half, were you gutted? Was it gut wrenching? And in the second half, what were you feeling in the stands?
Well, what I was feeling in the first quarter, really, as I said, it was a proper Munster final, and it was a good game, very enjoyable, as Munster finals should go, very close, nothing given away really as such. And the second quarter, then, I think really, in fairness to Tipperary, if you look at last year's championship match against Tip, the Munster final 2 years ago, of all teams really that has played Limerick in the last number of years, Tip were at the wrong side of a few beatings. So it was obvious they were going to come to this party, and they were going to throw, as the man says, the kitchen sink and the bathroom sink with it. So they were going to come with everything. And, obviously in the second quarter, it was evident. And they probably confused their defence slightly with all the running. There were an awful lot of players who were running lateral. And as the game was going on at that stage, I was kind of saying to myself, right, our defenders possibly aren't getting the same protection that they usually get in matches. And that usually comes from 8, 9, 10, 11 and 12. And obviously when half-time came, John Kiley and his management crew and Paul Kinnerk, they could sit down, take stock, cool heads. Most games, I believe, and I would have said this on several occasions, most games are won or lost at half-time. And obviously they size it up and they come out cool, calm and collective. And, Liam Sheedy was the opposite when his boys were going in.
Yeah, do you think that it showed it close up, like the clapping he was doing, he looked like he was in a serious zone. So you feel that like something like that could, well, I don't think you're going to necessarily say it set the wrong tone, but like so what do you think that can do in a dressing room, that the players aren't going to be cool and calm for the second half, or what do you mean by that?
What I mean by that really is, I suppose, Liam Sheedy, he's not new to management. He's in it a good number of years. Okay, there's certain stuff that he does on the line, but especially in the last 2 years and even in the last year, he probably upped the ante emotionally himself, and it's something we're not used to seeing. So I'd imagine, if I'm kind of saying that and thinking that, obviously the Tipperary players when they're running off the field, when they see this, it's probably new to them either as well. So I'm not saying it bad. The only reason I made that comment, Limerick went in nice and cool and calm, sat down, took stock, came out calm and cool, and and if you are to implement a game plan, there's no point doing it when the emotions are high or when the emotions are low. So you're trying to be as balanced as you can, even when you take the title of the game into consideration. And that's a skill in itself to keep a cool and composure at that level.
Yeah. Is that typical of Limerick then, anyway, that at these different quarters they're able to get that message to the players and that they're able to kind of see it out? I mean, in the first half, like Tipperary were all over Limerick and you couldn't get a handle on Jason Ford. Bubbles probably could have scored 1-3 on another day. He was moving around the place. Maybe Seamus Callanan was probably the only one who wasn't really going to town as such, even Jake Morris and all. So is it being able to get that cool message across, and there's probably no one better than Kiley and Kinnerk?
Yeah, without a doubt. And, you need to have faith and trust in your squad. I went for a cup of tea at half-time underneath the stand and met Steve McDonough, and we were chatting, and he said, well, what do you think? Well, I said, I have faith in these guys. I said, don't throw the towel in. They'll come back. I was kind of hoping they'd come back, and I was kind of confident they'd come back. But I also said in the last 3 to 4 years, they're possibly facing their biggest test ever. And they did last week. And, the truth always comes out in the field, and thankfully when Limerick came out in the second half, their character, their personality, as well as the game that they wanted to implement, it just all came in zinc together.
Do you think Tipperary faded out? Like, it's noticeable enough that around the 30th minute, or maybe even around the time that Gillane and Dan Morrissey came on, Limerick seemed to be a little bit on top coming into half-time, but just missing chances. So it was kind of like the tone was set there from the 30th minute on that maybe you were going to start taking over.
Yeah, but a vital move at that particular stage now, to be fair, because Richie didn't look that comfortable in there. And so bringing on the 2 subs at that stage was absolutely crucial. And the minute the 2 of them came in, Richie or Dan Morrissey went straight into full back, and straight away you could just sense a calmness, a bit of composure, a bit of steadiness, and a bit of cool head. And Gillane straight away had an impact when he came on. So that was a huge boost to the squad going in at half-time, meaning, okay, we're full tilt now, here we go. And as you rightly said, I suppose the last 3 minutes before half-time, you could sense that the work coming back. I suppose my surprise really, Shane, was I wasn't that surprised that we came back. I was kind of surprised they did it as quick as they did and in the fashion that they did it. Within 10 minutes, they had it brought back to 3. So that in itself will tell you the amount of effort and that was put in by every player to make sure that happened.
Yeah, because then I watched the game back since, and it's very difficult to kind of make these changes or see these changes that you should make in the heat of battle. Like, you've been a manager, you've been a player, you know how tough that is when there's a maelstrom going on around you. But when I look back, I think Limerick made those changes early in the first half. Not every manager is going to make changes in the first half. That maybe Tipperary could have brought on the young players that actually did impress, like Cadell, Mark Keogh, Brian McGrath. I know he got turned over once, but he did quite well. These lads looked fairly much to the manner born, even Willie Connors, that Tipperary, maybe like after 42 minutes or something like that, before you'd fully taken over, maybe Tip could have made those changes a bit quicker and they suffered for it.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I suppose there might have been a small bit of pressure put on the Limerick management themselves, because if you go back to the Cork game, if you take Garrod Hegarty, Tom Morrissey, Seamus Flanagan, and Aaron Gillane, the 4 of them were whipped off in that game. And it wasn't because of burnout, or it wasn't because the 2 tanks emptied. They were taken off because they underperformed. So obviously they looked at the setup, and there would have been a bit of talk in around Limerick with the dropping of Aaron Gillane in particular, and Dan Morrissey. So, and it was obvious, if they were going to move, they had no choice but to move early. Yeah, but as you rightly pointed out, when you look at Tipperary, and if from the outside looking in, and I've serious respect for what they've done and what they've done for the last couple of years. I have a lot of respect for Paddy Maher in particular, and I suppose, and when you look at their underage success, and you're kind of saying to yourself, right, there was a few fellas picking my old brains, asking me what do I think of the Munster final. And I said, being honest with you, I'm sticking by my goods. I still think Limerick will win by 7 or 8 points. And they were saying, why are you saying that? Well, I said, we're still playing the same Tipperary team as we did last year and 2 years ago. But my opinion would be slightly different if there were about 4 or 5 young guys thrown in there and they were kind of making dull grade and they were kind of shaking it up a bit, but that wasn't the case. And I suppose if one had to be critical of Tipperary, that is the obvious one you have to look at. Where are these young fellas gone? Where are these Dassoons gone?
And it must be difficult too to, like, when you have legends at a game, to all of a sudden say, well, we can, we can't start you anymore, or, dropping legends at a game is tough. But then you look at the Dublin model, the footballers and the lads into their 30s that they've brought on as finishers. And I just wonder, like you talked about, maybe if Tip changed the team around, that maybe you'd have a little bit more concern about them, that if Tipperary were using some of these key men and bringing them on later in the game, or a couple of them later in the game, that it mightn't be the end of the story for Tipperary yet this year.
No, without a doubt. And, every player is different. And there was an awful lot of talk about Paddy Maher, will he do or wouldn't he do? And I know in my heart and soul, like, Paddy Maher is a thoroughbred. He's there for years. And in fairness to him, he's delivered every day they went out. Okay, is he still the road runner as he was 5 or 10 years ago? Certainly not. But you can make up for that by reading the game that much quicker, number one. And I suppose taking a chance, number two, and anticipating a ball coming in. And actually, I thought he played very well next Sunday myself.
He did, yeah.
And, I thought he did well. Started off a bit shaky, but he came to grips with Flanagan fairly quick. And, with the likes of Paddy Maher, he's always going to survive. You're not going to catch him out because he's around too long, number one. He's too good of a hurler, number two. And as I said, he's a very good mentality. But you're right in what you're saying. Every player is different. Some players then, in their early 30s, all of a sudden, bang, legs could go. And I suppose that's the big one really at inter-county hurling now, the modern game. If you're short of pins and your wheels, you're obviously going to struggle at that stage. And in fairness to Limerick, they asked a load of questions, especially in the second half. As I said, any time they ran a Tipperary and had them in the back foot, they got joy. And not only that, but in the second half, they protected their defence a lot better in the first half. So I think it's in that little tweak and asking the questions of Tipperary defence really was a turning point.
And what really stood out about Limerick is that Gerard Hegarty had fairly poor first half by his standards, grew into the game massively, and he was everywhere. Then also Galan, you obviously know him well from Patrickswell, but he gets dropped, but he comes in and responds the right way. So maybe is that kind of like a sign of this Limerick team?
Yeah, without a doubt. But I was most pleased with the subs they come on because I probably would be critical of the bench up until this point. But definitely last Sunday, as I said, when they all came on, and it was obvious then their ply was you get a run at it. But straight away, David Reedy's first ball got it off in a solo run and got a point. Pat Ryan, the exact same thing, off on a run, 2 or 3 guys in the Tipperary following him. He just laid it off over the bar. And I suppose that was the big message in the second half, really. But as you rightly pointed out, Hegarty, came into the game. Listen, that's his experience. And, he grew as the game went on. But overall, I think as a team performance, if you go through every Limerick player, a lot of them were very good, very strong. Barry Nash there, cornerback, I thought were superb for the whole hour. Was on a lot of ball. Declan Hannon was on an awful lot of ball. Burns in the second half, Kyle Hayes, and the 2 boys in the second half, 8 and 9, were on the world of ball as well. So, in fairness to Tipperary, they met a serious outfit in the second half. Everyone in the Limerick players were on it. And, it's nothing really to be ashamed of because they are a special team. And, and when they're on it, they are a machine. So for whatever team that's going to beat them, you have to match them in a lot of areas. But I suppose the most important one really, as I said, is the pins.
It's not the first time I've been witness to a big comeback from Limerick. You were playing in 1996. It was 1996. I remember Tipper up by 9 or 10 at half-time, brought it back to a draw, and you won the replay. Am I right in saying that one?
You're accurate enough. You're out of point. We're up by 11.
11?
But I can remember. I can remember actually. Yeah, I suppose back in 1992 in a league final we were down by 10 points and we came back and won by a point. In 1996, you're right, we were down by 11. We came back and drew. Went to replay in Patrickswell. We won that one. And then Richard Binnis, when he was manager of Limerick, it took 3 games to separate Limerick and Tipperary. And then you had last Sunday. So there is a bit of a history there with the comebacks.
We're kind of sicky doing it at this stage. One of the things, I saw a good stat from Sean Flynn. He did a piece. He's an analyst from Tipperary, and he was talking about the breaks. And he goes shows from the Munster final in 2019 that of the breaks won, Tipperary won 3 of 23 breaks in, I think, from their own puckouts, and it was 8 of 24 this time. So a slight difference, slightly better this time. But Tipperary just struggled to win that contested ball against Limerick. Like the athleticism that you bring to the table, even like, you know, if you were to look at it, you'd say Ciaran Lynch, one of the smaller players on the field, but maybe he's actually the strongest one out there per pound, like pound per pound. He's just a bit of a tank. But do you think Tipperary can live with, is it your athleticism that also separates you and your power?
Well, yeah, go back to the first half, which you rightly pointed out. You know, Limerick got a bit of joy from, I suppose, the old puck-outs. And the puck-out, man, if you were there, there'd be snow and it coming down. But they got 2 goals out of that. And even when they did go along, Tip got joy in the second half, in the first half. But Limerick had to look at that because the 3 players, Limerick had about 9 or 10 defending each puck out in the second half, and Limerick came out with every second ball. Now, go back to your point. Yeah, the one thing that I see, there is the gap doesn't appear to be as big as it was 4 years ago. What I mean by that, like 4 years ago, 3 years ago, Limerick, you know, they were an obvious team that you'd say, you know, they're possibly the most physical, strongest, athletic team presently back then. But to be fair to the other counties, and it's 3 years later, Tip have improved in that area. Waterford definitely have improved. Galway were always big men. So the gap isn't as wide as it was a few years ago. So obviously, and that comes from the strength and conditioning training. But yeah, I think the big one here is, and possibly he doesn't probably get enough of recognition in around setting up a team and for the breaks. Like Paul Kinnerk really has done an unbelievable job in Limerick, and he done a serious job while he was in Clare. And you know, if you have to be very honest, in my own opinion, he's turned the game of hurling inside out for the better for the last 3 or 4 years. I believe that because a lot of teams are implementing it and trying to prevent Limerick and watch what they're doing and trying to stop them. And obviously, if you haven't any grasp of that tactically, you're definitely going to struggle in that area. And, you know, last year's All-Ireland final was the proof of that pudding. You know, they just didn't know, they didn't know what was happening with Limerick, or they couldn't counteract it, or they didn't set up in such a way to try to stop them. So that's a massive one. And but to answer your question, yeah, Limerick are still the most powerful team out there, I believe. But is the gap shortening? Without a doubt, I think.
Yeah, because what do you think is the biggest thing that has changed in terms of how Paul Kinnerk and John Kiley, of course, in terms of how they set up the team? Because traditionally, Limerick were thought of as a blood and thunder team that go out and give it everything, but it's not as simple as that anymore, obviously.
No, far from it now at this stage, because if that was the case, they wouldn't have 3 months to All-Irelands in a league. And I suppose, come here, I'm kind of conscious here now, right? There's a lot of strength and conditioning trainers with each county, and there's a lot of coaches. So I'm certainly not going to be giving away any secrets here chatting to you. But, you know, but like, and I suppose what I will say to you is there isn't much point watching a 2020 hurling game with a set of naughties eyes, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I understand it. What about Kyle Hayes, though? I mean, he is the archetypal 21st century hurler. He really is. Like that goal, I actually think Michael Breen did quite well in him for the most part. But the one time Breen wasn't there to track him, like that goal was just sensational.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you, actually. I thought Breen, okay, he might have fouled him once or twice at the last minute, because Breen is a fair athletic man himself. You know, he's an old player that strikes me. He lacks a bit of confidence. If he got a bit more confidence, he could be a Kyle Hayes in the making, you know, because he shows a lot of the same attributes as Kyle Hayes has done. It's just probably lacking a small bit of consistency, but he's still a great player. Yeah, listen, I said it about Kyle Hayes there leading into the Tipperary game. You could put any number on his back at this stage, and he'll settle in there and do a job there. As it stands, he's just a machine, being honest with you. And, you know, and it isn't that he's a machine and he's 33. He's a machine early in his 20s, so he's going to be a machine for a good number of years. But a great bit of great attitude. And I watched him closely defending, you know, as a half-back. He doesn't really mind who he's on. And, you know, he kind of just keeps the hand out, and great defender, did a great job at centre forward, back half back, equally will do the same job. But the goal he got, to be fair, it was the greatest goal I've ever seen live, or the greatest goal I've ever seen on TV. I was kind of saying to the friend alongside me, I said, is this real, or can we rewind it? It was a super goal, and I knew, and it's hard at times at the spur of the moment when you're at a match, kind of, sometimes it takes people until they get home. I knew there and then it was a special moment and a special goal, and to be fair, from a special player.
And for like, your point is replayed forever and ever. Now there's actually something to put alongside it. People don't have to just sicken you about your great point.
No, my point now is like the salmon of knowledge. It's all news 25 years ago, and we leave it back there.
Yeah, absolutely. But, for the rest of the year then, like, Limerick are in the driving seat. I mean, I expect Galway maybe to come again. Dublin beat them obviously in the Leinster semi-final. I think Tipperary have a little bit more in them. Cork, like, I'm wearing the orgaretro.com jersey and get 10% off with the promo code OurGame if you want to get this one or the Limerick one. But like, I thought Cork were very impressive in a lot of ways against Limerick, even though Robbie O'Flynn didn't fire, Patrick Horgan didn't fire, Harnedy went off injured early. The puckouts kind of imploded for Cork at times, which Limerick do to a lot of teams. But still in all, sometimes Cork played some beautiful hurling. I think their trajectory will go up at some point. They'll win an All-Ireland, maybe not this year, but they could bother you down the line if they meet you.
Yeah, I must text you on my address. You can see me on one of those jerseys that you're wearing at the moment. But
yeah.
Come here. I was at the Cork game and I watched it very closely. And I met Donal O'Grady afterwards. He was up and down stand with a few boys around. He was obviously doing some kind of analysing, and that's fine. And I chatted with him briefly, and I said, Donal, you won't get a greater opportunity than you did today. And he agreed with me. And, it was the 2 goals, really. It was a turning point. But I was watching Cork closely, and I could see there's definitely something there. And if Horgan, now, to be fair, there are probably people a bit hard on him. I didn't think he got a whole pile of ball that day. And automatically, when you don't get a whole pile of ball, I suppose the easiest thing for people to say, Horgan was bad. He didn't really get much ball, to be fair. Harmony also went off injured. So there's your 2 best forwards not involved in the game. I thought O'Mahony did very well wing back. I thought the young guy, Connor forward, Jack O'Connor.
Jack O'Connor, yeah. Yeah,
there's something in him. I thought he kind of troubled Brian Finn for the first 25 minutes. Yeah, he did trouble him for the first 25 minutes. And I thought Darragh Fitzgibbon actually was probably the best man in the 30. And, I could see something in Cork, but their big players will have to come. Cahalan fullback, probably his best game for Cork too. So I saw something in him that particular day. And as you rightly pointed out, Limerick needed those 2 goals, because Cork had an opportunity that day because Limerick didn't fully kind of come to the party that day and they weren't fully focused. So Cork missed an opportunity that particular day. And come here, they have a massive game next now against Clare. And I suppose the one team that I'd be watching closely the last few games is Clare. I'm really enjoying what I'm watching, really enjoying the job Brian Lohan is doing. He's he's a mix of the modern game, but what I really like about it now, actually, his defenders are defending the way you should defend.
And what do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is, okay, if you take Cathal Barrett cornerback on Aaron Gillane, Diarmuid Burns has the ball, he is on the opposite side. There's no point Cathal Barrett waiting for Diarmuid Burns to strike the ball. He should know automatically the space in front of Aaron. That's where it means. So what I mean by that is, as he's throwing the ball up or even looking, Barrett should be gone. And a lot of defenders are kind of getting caught like that. They're waiting for the last minute.com. They're going too late when the forward is gone. It's too late to go in because 9 times out of 10, most balls coming in are 60-40. Definitely for Limerick, they're 60-40 coming in. They're beautiful balls. Flanagan, 9 times out of 10, is going to get beautiful ball into him. Aaron Gillane, 9 times out of 10, the exact same thing. But I've yet to meet, Maher did it once or twice last week now, to be fair. He went to him and got a late flick. And that's the anticipation of defending. If you are a defender, you're not going to be giving your corner forward 3 yards, 5 yards, or 6 yards. In actual fact, you shouldn't give him 2 inches really if you're going to do your job right. That's what I mean.
Yeah, because like playing in the full back line is very difficult these days because the likes of Diarmuid Burns will look up and wait till the last second until you have until you make that move that gives you the small bit of separate. It's a very tough job, I have to say, these days, though. Like, I feel a lot of sympathy for full back lines.
It is, but at the end of the day, you have a 5, 6, and a 7, and the most important thing in the modern game, especially tactically the way it's going, you have to have your shape correctly defensively. And if most oppositions set up correctly and keep their shape, you won't be getting the same grass in the left, and you won't be getting the same grass in the right. But if number 10 and number 12 is going to take you on a merry little dance and a little jog, you're going to leave an acre there, and you're going to leave an acre there for Dermot Burns, or else Declan Hannon, or whatever other defender. So it's about shape, really, Shane. But you're right, your whole full back line can be exposed within 5 seconds. And that's where the concentration levels comes in then.
Yeah, this is where, like, the likes of Liam Sheedy and what he has to try and come up against. Do you let Gearóid Hegarty drift off and not follow him out? So he obviously played Brendan Maher's sweeper and told the rest of them, man mark. So follow Tom Morrissey, follow Gearóid Hegarty everywhere they go. And if they do that and Dermot Burns comes out with a ball, then, Brendan can't cover the entire, width of the pitch. So it's a tough job. Like, that's why Limerick are so good. And just if I could actually jump onto the other thing, you obviously take up that point. But did you think either of the red cards should have been red cards? That's not to take away. I think Limerick would have probably won anyway. But do you think that they were red cards?
I missed the Iron one live, and I kind of saw the Seamus Flanagan and Paddy Maher's incident. And to be fair, Maher would be a bit like myself. He wouldn't be staying down for the sake of it. So there was obviously contact made there. And, I don't know, did he get a card? I don't think he did get a card.
He got a yellow, yeah.
Did he get a yellow?
Yeah.
Okay, I was kind of thinking that he might have, and then there could be a follow through. So I don't know. Definitely, that was a dangerous challenge, silly challenge. I'm delighted he didn't get a red card, and I'll tell you why in a minute. The Angolan, when I watched it when I came home, and I kind of I sized it up, and I said, right, okay. And I suppose I'm looking at the referee. You play advantage and you don't play advantage. He nearly needed a saddle to get up an arm at this stage, right? So I think if the referee took authority with the whistle, the first free, I don't think it would have developed, because there was a bit of flick and there was a bit of tipping, and then there was a flick back. But initially, the first free should have been the one that he should have kind of took and kind of took authority and said, that's the one. It developed, and there might have been 2 more frees after. So what I'm saying is, if he kind of pulled it up initially, it could have been prevented. But I suppose the red card probably would have taken the glass off it. And, when I rewinded, Michael Dignan mentioned the red card about 4 or 5 times. Nancy Daly mentioned another 2 times that night. And, the 2 boys, you swear they were field mice themselves in their playing. So, come here. Thank God there was no red card given out, Shane. As I said, it would have taken the whole glass out of it. And, Aaron Gillane isn't a dirty player. Okay, was there a flick back? Yeah. Should you do it? No. And he shouldn't do it again. And, I suppose I'm going to say that kind of biased. But taking the bias out of it, it probably would have taken the glass off it. There was 1 card or 2 red cards given,
Yeah. So you mentioned Clare there earlier. What did you make of their win over Wexford? I mean, they were 110 to 3 points up early on, and Wexford were all at sea. And I'm sure you were probably the same as most of us, wondering what exactly is the plan here, and why is there nobody in the forward line for Wexford? It was very confusing to know what are they actually trying to do here.
Yeah, and I suppose if you look at Clare, they were extremely lucky against Tipperary. I thought they hurled very well and robbed, and obviously they were going to get up for this one. And as I said earlier on, I was extremely impressed how they're going about their business, and Brian Lawn is doing a super job. And a few very good quality players too. Conlon was a huge movement back to centre back. He's doing a great job there. And I think this deserves to be said as well, because I think they've shown great faith on the half back from 6 Mile Bridge as well, to throw him in there in a few games that didn't come through an academy. And it shows great courage. What's his name? The wing back, I'm thinking of.
Davy Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, I think it's great to see that. And he's a warrior, and you could see he died for the old jersey and died for the team. And all he needs really is pitch himself in the tent for about 6 months in front of a handball alley, and he'll be fine after that. But a good bit of stuff now, I have to say. But the lads have shown great courage to stick by him. But come here, when you look at the Wexford, you'll go out and you'll try to implement the plan. And at times then, if there's 15 guys out there, Shane, and unfortunately, it's rare you're going to get 15 of them totally singing from the same hymn sheet. All it takes is 1 or 2 to not do their job, to derail the whole system. And I think possibly there could have been a bit of that going on.
Yeah, like Davy's been there for 5 years now. He's a man who's won a Munster title with Waterford. He won a league title with Clare, won an All-Ireland with Clare, and obviously he's now won a Leinster title with Wexford. But they haven't been getting results the last 3 seasons. Since winning the Leinster final, they don't have a championship win if you take the Laois one, which they'd be expected to win out of the equation. Do you see him staying on another year there? Like, if you were in his boots and you've been a manager, would you stay on for another year?
Yeah, myself personally, no, because at the end of the day, there was an old phrase there years ago, and you might have heard it yourself. You're as good as your last game as a player, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that also could be used as a manager, and every manager knows himself when it's time to go or when it's not time to go. And I suppose the question that should be asking when you're leaving is, why is he gone instead of when is he gone? That would be my own philosophy. But it's Davy's call, only he knows himself. And to be fair, when you put your head in the chopping block as a manager, obviously you're going to be judged on results, you're going to be judged on matches, and ultimately you're going to be judged on silverware that you're going to win with a team, or if you're not going to win with a team. So, I think everything's kind of covered there in the tail end of what I said.
Yeah, and how do you see the games this weekend coming? Watford against Galway.
Yeah, and I'm taking the easiest thing to say is, of the teams that are left, when you look at the league and when you look at the championship, the weakest team you'd probably say would be Waterford. And, I was kind of taken back by their performances this year, actually, because, they did a super year last year, got to the All-Ireland final. Okay, what happened? The final happened, the final. But, when you get to an All-Ireland final, there should be a taste of more. I can remember feeling that taste when you get to Croke Park when you go out there. You want to taste it again. So automatically, when you go back for the following season, there should be an almighty kick, and I haven't seen it. So I'd be fancying. Galway got caught against Dublin, but I'd fancy Galway strongly this week.
Yeah, and you've seen both Clare and Cork this year, so I'd be nudging towards Cork myself, more not because of what they've produced, really. Just I think the trajectory is there for them to improve. Whereas Clare, I don't know how much more they can improve. I've been impressed, but I just don't know if the ceiling is as high for them.
Yeah, you could be right. Yeah, possibly missing one or two. I'd probably go along with that myself. Yeah, but yeah, and in itself, Lohan, if you watch what he's done in the last 2 games, he's going to turn this one into a right derby altogether. So even though there is huge scope for Cork improving, have we seen the fullness of the performance of Clare as yet? Who knows? We're only judging on our last 2 games. Is there more in the tank, in the spare tank? I possibly think there is. It's a hard one to call, actually.
Yeah, actually, a question has come in from Jack Nulty. What do you think of Brian Cody's Kilkenny this year? Obviously, beat a weakened Dublin. Dublin had lost 4 players through COVID, 2 subs and 2 starters. Owen O'Donnell off injured early and Mark Shuta off injured at half time. So, it wasn't ideal. But what have you made of Kilkenny?
Yeah, I'm delighted, actually. I'd have a fondness for Kilkenny. I kind of always did. And even there's a part of me there that's saying that I'd love to see him win one for Cody before he bow out. There is that. And
really?
Yeah, I would, yeah, without a doubt. I'd have serious time for him. And I love their passion, and I love the love they show the game of hurling, that they always did show it. And I suppose when even they hadn't exceptional teams, they always got the fundamentals right. They always kind of empty the tank to stay going for the final whistle. And they get, as I said, those things always right. And, all they're a different kind of an outfit this year. They've improved a lot. And I suppose, if I had to be really honest, if we jump the next fence, if I had to pick a team that we'd love to play in an All-Ireland final, I'd be going for Kilkenny. In one hand. What?
Because you owe them one from 2019.
Well, a bit of that, yeah, a bit of that. And not only that, really, just to show, not really because of that. I still see him up there as the kings of hurling. Even though we've 2 All-Irelands, they've set the standard, that everybody has to reach. With the Eddie Brennan team and Sheffield team, that team, have won everything that needs to be won in hurling. And we all know the longevity of those as individual players and what that squad did. And I'm just watching this present Limerick team because I think I have a sneaky suspicion they can equal what they've done, or probably slightly better. But as I said earlier on, I would like to see Kilkenny, win an All Ireland. Probably not at our detriment, but I would like it for Cody to be fair.
And a person called Flash here says, what did you think of the Limerick under-20s last night in the win over Clare? I'm not sure if you saw the game or not, so I might be catching you off guard on that one.
You are going to catch me off guard, and I try to come across as authentic and genuine, so I'm not going to even bluff it. I could bluff if I want to, but I won't.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, the likes of Cathal O'Neill and Adam English coming, and Colin Coughlin at centre-back as a Tipperary person. I'm fairly worried about the way Limerick are going, because you're looking good. I definitely want to talk now about...
I do know those three players, yeah, and Young English has been outstanding last year and this year, and I've seen Cathal O'Neill up close personally with minors, seen him at college and the league, a few league games this year, and Colin Coughlin. Like, they're three guys in a bit of time, will catapult themselves up to another level at senior, I'd imagine, the next 2 years or 3.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've been keeping yourself very busy with your business, My Move Counselling. So you're a trained psychotherapy counsellor, if I had that correctly. Can you talk to me about your business and how you even got into doing it?
I can, yeah. I suppose I went back to college as they call it, a mature student a few years ago, and I suppose I would have an awful lot of jobs. I have a TV at home now, here upstairs, and it would be the length of O'Connell Street in Dublin with various jobs down through the years, and I was never fully kind of happy in anything that I did really in our own jobs and working. And I suppose the one that I'm in now, I would see it no different to a nurse or a chippy or a priest. I felt my calling to it, and I followed it, and I qualified there a good number of years ago. But during that time, I was working in Coolberry and Brewery. It's a residential treatment centre in Limerick. So I'm kind of hovered there for the last 10 years. And I suppose 5 years before that, I was up working in the homeless hostel industry inside Limerick with under Novus McGarry House. And I suppose ultimately, I'm still in Coolberry, but I always wanted to kind of tackle something myself. And I started there about 2.5 months ago. A company called My Move Counselling and Addiction Services with 2 or 3 other counsellors. And I suppose my motivation at the time really was, okay, we're in the middle of the COVID. There was an awful lot of people that I was overlapping that were absolutely struggling. Addiction was one side of it, but they were obviously struggling in depression and their moods being low and nothing to do. And so we started about 2.5 months ago, and thankfully it's gone very well, and we're in the process of looking at another unit and starting there, all going well in the next 2 weeks also, and it's growing all the time, Shane, thank God, and there's no point kidding ourselves when we're talking about addiction at the moment. I suppose the biggest one that's out at the moment is cocaine.
Yeah, and
it's an issue. It's an issue in every little club. It's an issue in every little village. And I'd imagine somebody knows somebody who's struggling in the line of cocaine at the minute. And the reason I'm mentioning cocaine, because it seems to be the biggest one at the minute. And, even during the lockdown when the pubs were closed, I always say this, there's no bank holidays for addiction. If you want alcohol, you get it. If you want cocaine, you get it. And it was absolutely rampant during the lockdown. And, it still is. And I'll give you one example of where it's actually gone. And and I suppose from working in the residential treatment centre, working with a guy who would be in there for drugs and alcohol, and and some of these guys might owe a few pounds to drug dealers, and I suppose usually they'd probably owe to 2 or 3 dealers, but in modern time they're owing it to 7 or 8 or 10 drug dealers. So it'll just give you an idea of the scale of it. It isn't going away, and it's kind of growing and growing and growing, if anything. But bring it back to My Move, yeah, I kind of specialise in addiction, and we've other counsellors inside that specialise in bereavement, physical abuse, sexual abuse, depression. So, whatever may present into My Move, we have a counsellor there that specialises in it, basically.
Yeah. Like, it's interesting you bring up the cocaine. That certainly is a massive thing. And I was just reading an article earlier today. I'll just bring it up on screen now. It was one on RT, and it was like the number of people seeking treatment for addiction to crack cocaine in Ireland has surged by 400% in recent years. according to the latest national figures released by the Health Research Board, more women than men are seeking treatment for addiction to the drug. The figures are included in the latest report from the National Drug Treatment Reporting System, which covers a 7-year period from 2014 to... Do you think people are as aware of that? I think everyone anecdotally is aware that it's on the rise and that it is everywhere, but it's quite that bad. And do you deal with women as well as men? Just even like that figure there saying it's more women is quite striking.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and I'm not surprised at that. Yeah, and I think an awful lot of people are aware, but I suppose it's kind of a bit taboo kind of a subject, and not too many people want to kind of, I suppose, speak about it and kind of get real to the amount of damage it is causing. First of all, the people who are actually in addiction, but the knock-on effect that has on a family member, whether it's a brother or sister, a mother or a father, it's a destroyer, and it does leave devastation marks on families as well. So, unfortunately, it's a conversation that needs to be had, number one. And I suppose it's the big struggle there was during the lockdown. A lot of the services were closed, and they weren't taking in people because of the COVID. So it probably escalated hugely at that stage, and thankfully, we opened up in the middle of all of that, and that's why we were so busy. And as I said, it's growing and growing, and long may it continue with that.
And what was the tipping point for you to say, I'm going to start my own thing here with others?
Good question. I suppose I'm fairly confident at what I do, and when you're working in a residential setting, it's a total different setting than when you're in the therapeutic relationship and when you're in the one-to-one situation. And I suppose it depends on where the individual is at in his addiction. Obviously, there is a line there. If you cross it, and it's pretty obvious whether to assess a person whether they need residential treatment or not. But if you haven't crossed that line, you can do it through the counselling route or through the counselling program, and follow an aftercare program as well, and follow attend your meetings also. So there's a few different areas, a few different routes you could go down, and but as I said, it all depends where the person is at himself, or how deep he's in the addiction, or how long he's in addiction.
Generally, are there telltale signs with somebody who's struggling with, something that you might be looking to treat? Or what would you say to people out there if they're worried about somebody, or a person themselves, if they are kind of struggling with one of these issues? What's the best way to go about getting in contact with yourself or somebody else, whoever's an expert that they should probably see?
Yeah, and I suppose thankfully it has been recognised now as a disease and an illness, and and I suppose it sounds so simple. And it sounds so easy to verbalize it for someone to reach out for a bit of help. But, when you're in that dark hole and you're in the throes of the depression and you can't see any way out, it's extremely hard to reach out for a bit of help. So obviously if family members or friends can actually see this, so I suppose, and husbands and wives and sons and daughters, grandfathers and grandmothers, so it's a family disease as well. There's an awful knock-on effect to the family members. So I suppose it's to flatten the person with love and try to support him and guide him down such a route where he can, please God, make a phone call, or do one better, make a phone call for the person and take it from there. Because, the longer one stays in addiction, the more devastating it is and the worse it gets. And, ultimately, Shane, as strong and all as this might sound, I lost count of the amount of people who have died and committed suicide from addiction. And that's the facts and the reality of my last 10 to 15 years experience working in this field.
Yeah, because you certainly would have far more expertise in this than I would. But I know people who've suffered from alcohol addiction. And, there's always this notion or that you hear in general that a person reaches rock bottom. But rock bottom to some people is actually suicide or something that's terminal, something that there isn't something to come back from. Rock bottom suggests you'll bounce back, that you'll reach a point and bounce back, but it's not always that way.
Yeah. And I suppose my first comment to that, it's the only disease it will tell you that you haven't got it. And, and it'll come at you at every angle, and it'll play tricks with you psychologically. And even if you just take the problem drinker, he'll do everything in his power to cut back to drinking, and he'll want to cut it back. But inevitably, he might do it for a night or two. But it's inevitable it'll get twice as bad again eventually. And, do people have to wait till they go to rock bottom? Certainly not. And, but as I said, it's the big one there is trying to get the person to get him to see that he needs help and to support him and reach out for a bit of help. As I said, it's a very tough one. Addiction is a totally different animal. And, as I said on my own Facebook page, it's a killer. It has killed. It's still killing and will continue to kill. The longer one stays caught and trapped in addiction, ultimately, that will be the end result. And sometimes it does it slowly, and sometimes, it does it quickly.
And one thing I've been interested in is people who are like functioning alcoholics or functioning drug users, that they're actually maybe slowly building a problem. And it seems like to the outside world, they're actually able to, that there isn't really a problem because they're still functioning. So, I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean that their addiction is any less bad.
No, and, I was having a cup of tea there and a sandwich there about 2 weeks ago outside the shop, and I was sitting down having a cup of tea, and there was about 3 or 4 people about a table away from me, and they were all in their early 20s. And it wasn't that I was eavesdropping or anything, but I could hear the conversation, and it was all coke and tablets and going out Friday night and Saturday night and the shenanigans and all that goes with it. So I was listening there to that. So do you know what I did as I was leaving? I had a business card in my back pocket. And I thrown it down the table, and I said, there you go. I said, there's a possibility you might need that in a few years' time or a few months' time. And, when you're starting an experiment in drugs, whether it's at 17, 18, 19, and 20, and things are fine, and you've yourself convinced, I haven't a problem, it hasn't got me. But it's inevitable. It's only a matter of time, because the longer you do stay engaged in that activity, it's inevitable it's going to catch you.
And like GA clubs are just a reflection of our society, just at large. I mean, it's in GA clubs all over Ireland too, or people not within the GA club, but there are people who play GA and are members of clubs all over Ireland that are also stuck into tablets, cocaine, whatever it might be. So people, who think that it's just a problem for different parts of society, that's probably not true.
You're 110% right, Shane, because actually I have to call. I'm actually waiting to get a bit of time to call to 2 different clubs in Clare and to do a workshop in around drug addiction or wellness. And I have 2 other clubs to call to Limerick. So that will give you an idea that it's rippling through most villages and most parishes in this country. And when I say village and parishes, there's people playing a bit of soccer and a bit of GA, and whether we like it or not, it's part of it. And it'll stay that way unless we educate them, and I suppose confront it some little bit. And it mightn't be a popular thing to say, but it's reality, it's real. I have my finger on the pulse here when it comes to clubs down in Limerick, and I know it's fairly well and truly alive in a lot of clubs and a lot of villages around Ireland, as I said. And that's the reality of it at the moment, Shane.
Yeah, like Limerick gets a bad rep at times. The obvious term Stab City is thrown out an awful lot. Like I went to college there 20 years ago for a year, so I've heard all of that kind of stuff. Do you think Limerick is any worse than anywhere else in Ireland?
Not at all. Like when I was saying there, I wouldn't even think of the Stab City. But come here, not at all. Far from it. I'm not going to start blowing in about Limerick. I'm from Limerick County all my life. I've been around the city all my life. Yeah, did they go through a bit of a spell there with certain families? They did. But as a city, is it beautiful? Has it lovely restaurants? Has it lovely scenery? Of course it has. So Limerick is no different. No, the big cities, Shane, really. And I suppose going back a good number of years ago, 15 or 20 years ago, 15 years ago even, I suppose, you'd be lucky to get a bit of hash out in a country village. But, they're the villages that I'm talking now is awash with cocaine presently at the moment and tablets. So that'll tell you how far it's after coming in the last 10 to 15 years. And, it has, as I said, it doesn't seem to be taking any vacation or going away in any short term. Like, it's alive, and it's an issue. So I'm going to do my little best in confronting it whatever way I can. And as I said, I've done a good few workshops in various clubs already around it, and please God, I have a few more to do.
Yeah, and do you know what? In some ways, it's probably even less taboo doing cocaine for certain people. I don't know if you saw the videos around Euro 2020 final. Like in the background on Sky Sports News at one stage, it looks like somebody's taking a sniff of cocaine. There's another video of a crowd of people around somebody, and he's taking a sniff. The whole crowd cheers. So people are getting more blasé about it too.
Yeah, and not only blasé, but I suppose the word that's coming to my heart now, they're trying to normalize it and just kind of make it, as if somebody having a cigarette out there. Should go out and have a line instead of a fag. You're fine. No one really mind. So they're trying to normalize it, and that will be extremely disastrous and dangerous if as a nation that we go down that road.
Yeah.
But as you say, Jim.
Yeah, and also just ask you about the homelessness. So you've worked in that area too. It feels to me anecdotally, like I live here close to Dublin city centre, it feels like there are more homeless people than there were previously. Is that the sense you get? Yeah,
there is, but in fairness to Limerick, the homeless industry inside the city, the amount of hostels that are in there, and there's a great homeless action team in there as well. There's no excuse really for anyone in Limerick City to be homeless. There's so many beds there, and there's so many hostels there. And, so if there is someone that's homeless, it's by their own choice, and it isn't that they've no place to go. So I think the homeless industry they've looked at that in the last number of years. Okay, 7 or 8 years ago, you might have had people who were homeless and hadn't got the beds, but there's a huge gap there in the last number of years. There's no real reason or excuse for anybody to be sleeping on the streets in Limerick because the beds are available in various hostels at the moment.
And do you think what do you think is the biggest factor, or some of the biggest factors around homelessness in Ireland, that people, whether they're going to take refuge in, whatever homeless facility is presented or otherwise, but that people end up in that situation in the first place where they don't have their own, home, their own place of dwelling?
Yeah, I suppose there's a thin line there really from someone becoming homeless for someone who has their bed. And I'm just going to pull this scenario out of the sky. And if you take this typical example of a mother and a father who would have a 19-year-old son, and who might have been smoking a bit of hash at 15, 16, 17, and on the drink and causing a bit of hassle, and has no money, isn't working, and robbing the mother and father to buy his drugs and selling the television or whatever, and they're living with that for 3 to 4 years, and literally their hands are tied. They can do no more. And it's ongoing and ongoing and ongoing. And if they put him out, inevitably, he's homeless. And if he then goes into the homeless industry, you're gone to a different level then.
How so?
So what I mean by that is he's gone living from his own house into a homeless hostel, and probably meeting guys similar to himself who might be worse than himself or just starting on the same level as himself. And, they're going to be living in addiction together. And, and that's going to be extra hard to try and to cut yourself or to keep yourself separated from addiction, But there is a thin line there how one can kind of cross over it and to become homeless. It doesn't take a whole pile, but, the longer you stay in addiction, the greater the chance that you have of becoming homeless eventually.
Yeah, and I suppose just to finish up on it then, is there any final point you'd want to make on it, or where do you want to take the My Move Counselling business?
Yeah, and I suppose we're in the infancy of it now at the moment, and, we're offering the one-to-ones counselling services, and, all going well within the next 2 weeks, we will be also opening an aftercare group, which we'll be holding once or twice a week. And on top of that, then we hope to be doing family support for family members of the clients, and also a recovery group as well. So that's our aim, and we're actually on the train to achieving that, but it's probably going to take a small bit more time. But presently at the moment, we're absolutely thrilled and delighted the way it's going, and but we still have to keep our finger on the pulse and to keep driving it.
And there's been plenty of positive feedback in as well. Jack Nulty says great interview. Joe LK20, a Limerick man, I'm sure. Great conversation, gives perspective. And DG, fair play, Ciaran. You're a real hero and a brilliant role model for young people. Keep up the good work. So good to be getting in that positive feedback. It's obviously touched the nerve with plenty of people, Ciaran.
Yeah, and come here, to be fair, anytime you do speak about addiction, someone knows somebody who is struggling in some shape or some form, whether it is alcohol, whether it is drugs, whether it is eating, whether it's social media, whether it's pornography, or whether it is mobile phones. Just the world of them out there at the minute. And, as I said, a lot of people can identify with the conversation we're having.
Okay, well, look, Ciaran Carey, really appreciate you joining me. Always great stuff to talk to you. So I'm sure we'll chat again soon. So appreciate that.
You're very welcome, Shane. We'll chat again before the All-Ireland, all right?
We will indeed.